My name is Katherine Schuh. I'm a product manager at Tufin Technologies. Ron, thank you so much for having me here today. So today I'll be sharing a story about one of our customers, Johnson Controls, which is a smart buildings company. For those of you who still visit an office, smart buildings technology controls the climate in our office buildings, so temperature, humidity, air quality, et cetera. And Johnson Controls, like many of our customers, is under a fairly significant regulatory burden because they deliver this technology to hospitals and other critical infrastructure. And so over the past couple of years, they made some pretty dramatic improvements in their network security operations. They removed over 60,000 non-compliant, risky, or misconfigured rules. They reduced the turnaround on change requests from 3 days down to 6 hours. And they reduced audit prep time from 6 to 8 weeks down to a single day. And so, spoiler alert, I'm going to be telling you how Tufin enabled them to achieve those kind of results. And certainly they're not the only company to achieve great results using our platform. So Tufin Technologies has been in business for over 20 years, and we've serviced close to 3,000 customers in that time frame. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Tufin brand, Tufin Orchestration Suite is a security policy governance and change management platform. So what that means is that we aggregate information from basically your network firewalls, your secure access service edge, your public and private cloud in order to provide a single pane view of how traffic is able to traverse that entire network. And so, why is that useful? Why would somebody need to use that kind of technology? Well, if you've ever done a firewall configuration audit, you know that it's a very painful and laborious process to go through each firewall device individually and check that the configuration is compliant. And more than that, anyone responsible for the security of a large, complex network like this needs a cohesive view of the network. Several high priority or high profile security breaches, like the 2021 Colonial Pipeline hack, happened because there was an exploitable path between two parts of the infrastructure that didn't normally speak to each other. So in that case, there was a legacy VPN that had an exploitable path to a production server, but there were two different teams that were managing those two pieces of infrastructure. And so there was certainly no way that somebody could have detected that pathway without some kind of central view. And oh, by the way, that centralized visibility also comes in handy when you're troubleshooting an outage. So what you see on the screen is an access flow from one data center to another with checkpoint device policies along the path. In many organizations, two independent teams are managing these two sets of firewalls or two sets of devices. And so without a central view like this, you're not really able to detect that there's an overlap. So on to the story about Johnson Controls. Like many companies, they have incrementally migrated more and more of their resources to the cloud over the past few years. They probably won't migrate 100%. Most companies still have a certain percentage that's always going to be on premise. But certainly by 2024, this year, they'd migrated over 50%. And that transition has fed into some growing complexity in their environment. And they were really not able to effectively manage the security and compliance of that composite network using the processes that they had before. So when they went looking for a solution, they set the following goals. They wanted to have a global prioritization for risk mitigation. They wanted to automate their change requests to save time, and they wanted to achieve continuous compliance in an ideal world. All of that while avoiding any sort of disruption to the business. So they, of course, chose to implement Tufin. I would say mostly because our automation capabilities are best in class and because of the architecture we provide. So when any customer implements Tufin, they first deploy a Tufin operating system built on a Rocky Linux by Red Hat. So technically, you could deploy this on your own Red Hat instance, but certainly we recommend the Tufin operating system. And on that operating system, they next install a dedicated Tufin-built K3s cluster. So for those of you who primarily work with SaaS tools, that doesn't sound very exciting. It's pretty standard nowadays, but many of our customers have actually never deployed a Kubernetes cluster before because they're typically responsible for managing on-premise infrastructure, and they're making some kind of transition to managing more cloud infrastructure. And so luckily, Tufin's Kubernetes cluster is pre-configured, so companies like Johnson Controls can reap the rewards of a secure and scalable architecture without necessarily needing to become experts in Kubernetes. And so another noteworthy aspect of our architecture is something that we call the open policy model. So this is the technology, something proprietary that we've been refining and cultivating over the past 20 years that really makes all of the cool Tufin features and functionality possible. Simply put, this is a framework for translating all of the different capabilities and configurations of network assets into an abstract universal language. So the more commonly used vendors are going to fall in the native integrations category. For these, when you integrate your devices during your initial setup, they're going to be supported right out of the gate. So actually, here's a quick recording of what it looks like to set up a device in our system. You would select it from the main menu here. You're going to add in some basic information that's going to be used to set up a secure handshake between the device and the Tufin platform. And so for one of our core supported devices, it's as quick as that. As soon as you hit save, then all of those devices appear in your topology map, like you can see on the screen. For less common devices, Tufin's OPM is highly extensible, and that was certainly by design. There's always going to be new technologies that are emerging, and you want to make sure that those are included in your topology visibility. And so you're able to add those devices with a little bit of extra configuration. All right. So Johnson Control's first goal was that they wanted to prioritize risk remediation. So certainly for customers who want to get started right away, we have some out-of-the-box tools that enable you to start with that prioritization. What you see on the screen is our security best practices report, and this allows you to pick out the low-hanging fruit in order to remediate those issues right away. But certainly Johnson Controls had bigger ambitions than that. They wanted something really systematic and something that they could use over the long term. And so Tufin allows you to segment the IPs and the assets in your network into abstract segments. We technically call them zones. And then you're going to document how traffic should be allowed to traverse between those zones. So for example, what we see here is that we have an AWS Exchange system, and we want to regulate how those applications are able to access the internet. So we're specifying the specific ports and protocols that it should be allowed to use. If Tufin finds a rule or a device that's permitting, hopefully my sound is doing okay, getting some feedback. If Tufin finds a rule that's permitting or enabling traffic between AWS Exchange and the internet that doesn't comply with these guidelines, then it's going to mark it as a violation. And so that's actually one of the main ways that Johnson Controls was removing, or one of the main factors driving the removal of a lot of their firewall rules, was that they were violating their unified security policies that they set up. So next, Johnson Controls wanted to automate their change requests. I'm sure many of you are wondering at this point, if you had to remove 60,000 roles in a single sitting, how would you do that in any kind of expedited way? That would certainly take you a long time if you're doing each of those changes by hand. And so that's where the power of Tufin's secure change platform really comes in. So in the case of Johnson Controls, they actually use ServiceNow as their primary IT or ITSM system. And so a request that's categorized as being related to firewall configuration or network configuration is routed to secure change, and it opens a ticket here. And this is actually an example of one of the workflows that Johnson Controls configured. There are just a few core main steps to this workflow. And the first one, they're doing automatic target identification. So this is useful because if you know that you need an application to be able to access a server, there may be 5, 6, 7, 8, 12 firewall devices between the source and destination. And so the automatic target identification is going to identify exactly which devices are going to need a policy change to either block or permit the kind of traffic that you're trying to modify. Next, there's going to be a risk analysis step. And the main purpose of this is that you want to categorize whether a request is low risk and should be implemented automatically, or whether it's high risk and it should be reviewed by a network security engineer. And then next, Tufin's designer tool is another really powerful way to save time when you're making these kind of network configuration changes. It's going to recommend the objects, rules, and specific changes that should be included to ensure that you're making the most efficient and secure modification possible. You don't want to be creating overly permissive rules. You want to be creating very specific and tailored rules that grant the minimum access needed. And then last, while Tufin is not necessarily managing all of your devices directly, we do have the ability to push changes to those firewall devices. And so once you have an optimal change suggested, then you can use automatic provisioning to push that change to the device. some tasks need to be happen on that side. It might happen automatically or it might not, depending on what specific device it is. But Tufin will verify the changes live before it will close the ticket. So that ensures that your changes went through. Now, another really cool way that you can speed up these change requests, and Johnson Controls definitely took advantage of this, is to use our Tufin Mate AI tool. So this is accessed from Microsoft Teams. It allows people in your IT department, like application owners, to do some quick and dirty path analysis in order to see whether an access flow is open or not. And then from here, if access is not permitted and they need it to be, maybe their application needs to be able to access a specific server, then they can open an access request from here. And all of those backend steps that we talked about, automatically designing the change and configuring it so that it's optimal, those are going to happen automatically in the backend. And if it's a low risk request, it would be pushed to the device. And within a few moments, the application owner could see that their request has been fulfilled. So it's pretty powerful. All right, the third goal that Johnson Controls had was that they wanted to achieve continuous compliance if possible. And so they used Tufin's approach. So to give you a quick summary of this, since we don't have too much time, Tufin's approach to continuous compliance is that A, you're using unified security policies to, hopefully I'm still connected, using those policies in order to govern your infrastructure. As changes come in, they're checked for compliance with your security policies. Any unauthorized or changes that are made without following that process are sent to the admin for approval. And then you can automatically assign an expiration date to new access flows or modified access flows so that those can be certified again at a future date. And so that's what Johnson Controls focused on, but certainly customers can progress from manual spreadsheets and manual changes all the way up to end-to-end automation for their network controls and policy management. And that's what this general progression is showing. And so certainly by the end of this, we would hope that you're able to effectively manage your risk. And one of the goals that Johnson Controls achieved was spending less time on their audit preparation. When you've implemented a continuous compliance program, then in order to show that you're compliant, you really just need to give your auditors access to the Tufin platform, and they can see for themselves the processes that you've put in place. All right, and so that pretty much sums up my presentation. On the screen is a QR code. It will take you to a link to see a more in-depth session on our hybrid architecture capabilities. I do hope that you'll check it out. It's certainly a great resource. And overall, happy to review any questions.